Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Service Over Self podcast. We are super excited to bring to you our very first episode of a passion project of ours for all of our listeners to activate on serving your respective communities. So my name is Henry Saxon, and I'm one of the co-hosts, and my good brother and friend, Coach Brent Carmichael.
How you doing, Sax, man? I think we need to first do some introductions to let everyone know exactly who we are and why we're doing this broadcast, and then get into some things of what we really want to talk about. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself.
Sounds good. And again, I'm Henry Saxon, and I am the Manning Principal for Saxon Advisors, which is a nonprofit consultancy here in Atlanta, Georgia. And my career has been with nonprofit organizations. So I've been at the forefront of the service industry for many, many years, which is why this was important for us to put on. So
Where you from, Sax? Tell us where you from.
Well, I'm from South Carolina, a place called Beaufort in the Low Country area, and grew up a country boy. And, you know, from humble beginnings, a working mom, several brothers, and went on to Iowa, of all places, for college. And I also participated in college football,
where we've had the pleasure of meeting each other.
Yes.
At the University of Northern Iowa.
The wonderful University of Northern Iowa, UNI.
Yeah, so I'm Coach Brent Carmichael. I'm born and raised in East Moline, Illinois. I got to give a shout out to my neighborhood. Shout out to Watertown. That's where I was born and raised, where I got all of my principles, where I was really got an opportunity to see what community service was like with some of the older gentlemen that were in my neighborhood. So I think they put me on that path to where I understood that, you know, serving others was very important. So as we get going, you'll learn more about us as individuals, where we're from, and our resume. But I think, you know, we're going to get into a lot of different topics, a lot of different discussions. And so I'm excited to be here with you, Sax.
So am I. So am I.
Just to have this opportunity to share as many times as we've sat, you know, at your house or over dinner, just sitting talking about things. I think, you know, this was definitely a thing that we needed to explore.
It's an important discussion. And before we get started, I'd like to express sentiment to our Lord and Savior.
Yes, sir.
Jesus Christ, who without him, this wouldn't be possible. And I think it's important in times like this to give him all glory and prestige.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm going to jump in real quick here and just, you know, kind of give an understanding of how I developed this passion for public service, or service over self, as the name of our podcast is. I'm going to attribute it to three men that kind of raised me. And the thing about being in Watertown, we were a very diverse community, and we had a lot of different people. So these three men, Mr. Martell, who lived down the street from me, taught me about helping others he was the guy that took me to all of the basketball games.
Right.
When I was in 6th and 7th grade, it got me excited for wanting to play for my high school, United Township High School. Then there was Mr. Montez, who got me into wrestling as in 2nd grade, who always called me champ and was very positive. Right. Who, you know, kind of put me on that direction and mindset of the mentality of helping others, just because he was a neighbor that lived next to my grandmother. Then there was John Perez, who to me is the epitome of what service over self means. He started a Junior Panther football program in East Moline, Illinois, with about 12 of us just from the neighborhood. And John, you know, is the guy that, I'm going to tell you is probably solely responsible for me being the person that I am today. And so I have to give them three men a shout out. But Watertown, East Moline, Illinois, I think they were the epitome of what community service and people helping each other was about, and that's what put me on the path.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. I'll come at it from more of a macro level, and to talk about why service and community service is so important to our society as a whole, right? Mm. And we live in a very generous country.
Yes, sir.
And like you, there are individuals who wanted to give back, wanted to help, saw a need, and stepped in there. And just like you, I have similar stories of coaches in particular.
Yes, sir.
And folks who pulled me by the side and took interest in me and saw something in me that I didn't see at the time. And we look back on it, and like you said, it was pivotal to the way our lives turned out. So
put us on that foundation.
Yeah, man. And but I also want to pan out and look at it from a societal level, and with the mindset that we all should spend a percentage of our time to giving back to our respective communities.
Yes.
And I think if we were to mobilize, a lot more intentionally, a lot of the social challenges that we have in this country could be addressed and more importantly, could be solved, right?
Yes.
And so that's what this podcast is about, is speaking to those issues and inspiring people to the extent we can to get involved,
Yes.
Without getting too technical, but there's a number of avenues we can all utilize to do that, like nonprofit organizations, our churches, a lot of institutions, that we can connect to and get the work done. So more to come on that stuff. But I was really moved, like you, Brent, by having individuals in particular took an interest in me and really pointed me around to things that I didn't necessarily see in myself.
I think when we look back, and I have a lot of conversations with people from our age group, and they always talk about how in the past, Big Mama or, there was a neighbor or somebody that took interest in you, or they disciplined you, or they were there when you needed them. And, those to me are things that are our foundations. And we're missing that now.
Yeah.
We're missing those foundations with, but it's all in us in our age. But we're not passing that on to our kids.
Yeah.
We're not passing that on to our youth. And I think, as we move forward episode to episode, I really want to focus on some of our young people. I want to recognize some of our young people that are engaged in community service, because I think if we are going to combat some of the things that we're dealing with in our society today, we have to include our young people.
Yeah.
And including them, but also giving them the things that we got, passing that stuff on down, Sax. So I'm excited for what this journey that we're getting ready to go on. I'm excited for, our listeners, and being able to gain some of the things that we have learned, and with the expectation and hope and prayer that we can, inspire,
right,
and motivate, and encourage,
right,
people to engage in community service. Because as we look at things right now that's going on in society, it looks like there's going to be a whole lot of people unemployed. There's going to be a whole lot of people that need service.
Yeah.
And, this, in my mind, is a time that we're going to need to be able to help each other. So I'm excited that you came to me, brother, and said, let's do this, man. So I'm excited.
Yeah, like I said, it's a very important discussion to have. And I think I think a lot of people are interested in it. And, hopefully this is the message that will be the tipping point for a lot of our listeners out there. Mm-hmm. So let's get started with how somebody can get started with volunteering. What are some of the avenues, that you've experienced working in volunteer work and supporting community?
I tell you, I had a unique situation actually from how I got involved in community service, and then I'll let you know how I feel others can. Um, I played professional basketball for 4 years in the CBA, and when I actually lived in Rockford, Illinois, I was going to the schools talking about education and professional basketball, and I seen the impact that I had on young people just from having that conversation about playing professional basketball and education. Now, mind you, I was a horrible student coming up, horrible in high school. So after I made it to, the to being able to be in a situation where I was a role model, going into the schools and seeing the impact that I had on some kids really was where I found my footing. Those three men, Mr. Martell, Mr. Montez, and John Perez, they showed me the way, but then the action was when I started going into the schools. And so today, I think with people, it has to start with being in your neighborhood and you see kids standing on the corner or kids you see at the store. Just say a simple hello. Getting to know, building relationships. I think, one of the things that I think we are impacted on right now is that we don't talk to each other like we used to.
Right.
And I think in knowing some of our kids, regardless of, their hairstyle and, what they're wearing, they're still human and they still have needs. And I think when we, as adults, can build a relationship, and it may start one conversation at a time with the youth in your neighborhood, that would get you that feeling of being able to help, because now you got an opportunity for kids to listen to you and understand where you're coming from. Ain't going to agree on everything, but they'll understand. And so I think that's my encouraging words, is to get started by just building relationships with young people in the beginning.
Yeah, well, nobody's going to argue, reaching out to young people to help. They are our future. They represent about 25% of the population, but 100% of the future. So young people, if those of you out there that want to have an interest in developing them, nothing really is more noble, in my opinion. But there are other pathways too, based on your interests. It could be the elderly, it could be the disenfranchised, it could be the homeless, it could be veterans, it could be the sick and shut in, like you hear about it in church. So there's a lot of different pathways to service based on your interest level and your area of skills. So yeah, don't all of those avenues are available. Mm-hmm. I'm like you. I worked with Boys and Girls Clubs for my career, and young people was my motivation too. Now, I was a professional, but nonprofits like Boys and Girls Clubs rely on volunteers, just like most agencies. We all rely,
yes, sir,
on volunteers to get the work done. Mm-hmm. I'll take a bit of liberty and share with you what did it for me. Mm-hmm. I can remember many years ago in the Boys and Girls Club, there was a leadership program called the Torch Club, and the Torch Club was for kind of younger teens, 10 to 13 or so, and it was basically a leadership program. And it was a group club, so it was led by a volunteer. We trained them, and they would come in weekly and teach the kids about civics and entrepreneurship and overall community engagement. And one year I was asked to put on what we call a torch tune-up, which is essentially like a day-long conference. Okay. And as the lead person, I had to kind of figure out what to do. And I just couldn't. For the life of me, I just could not figure out what in the heck am I going to do with 150 middle schoolers. And I don't know how it came about, but I said, well, since civics and community involvement is one of the things, I thought, well, maybe it would be useful to have the kids experience how our government works. Okay. And I spoke to then one of the senatorial representatives who I knew, and I went to his office and just said, "Hey, listen, do you have a law that is digestible for a middle schooler? The process that y'all went through to make that bill a law. I just like to unpack it and share it with the kids." And he really helped me with that. So, do you know what it was? It was back many years ago when the speed limit was being determined to go from 55 to 65, right? And so he gave me all of the information around the pros and cons of changing that law. So what we basically did was we were able to book the Georgia Senate chamber. And what we did was I took that information and compiled some notes to make the case to support it, the increase to 65. And then I took the opposite view and put some notes there. So passed it out to all of the group clubs. And so the kids came prepared with a position one way or the other.
Right.
And then we had representatives for each group to go down in the Senate chamber, down in what they call the well, where they get to speak on behalf of the issue, and then the kids could all vote on it at the end. And Brent, these kids, they did their homework, they had their notes, and the kids, one after the one, went down to the well and made their points.
Yes.
And everybody was listening.
That's awesome.
And then the other side presented their case, and at the end, they all voted. Now, the volunteers and the staff, we were all up at the top watching this whole thing. And it was then and there I decided this is what I want to do.
Yes, sir.
This is what I want to do because it didn't really take that much. And the volunteers were very interested. They helped with it. And every kid left that area, left that event knowing what it took to make a law.
Right.
Right. And I said, if we could 10X this across the spectrum, education, sports, leadership, you name it, it's a powerful way.
But look at how you put them in a situation that they normally wouldn't be in.
They wouldn't have been there. Absolutely.
You know, and what they learned from it.
What they learned from
and
it.
Again, those are things that I think, you know, that we have to get to. So you made a statement earlier when you talked about the different, from a global standpoint, other things, because I talked from a youth standpoint. You had mentioned homeless and veterans. And I can't help but give, you know, our frat brother, Charles Jenkins, a shout out with CSM Refuge. Because he's given back to those veterans. He's a veteran himself. And he's doing his self-service over self by giving back. He's feeding veterans. He's clothing veterans. And he's meeting them where they're at. So it depends on, you know, what your passion is, because there's a lot of areas, as you just said, and ways that you could give back. You know, I like youth, you like youth, but he's dealing with homeless veterans. But there are so many others out here with mental issues, with counseling issues, that, you know, even educational issues that, you know, that all of us that have our skills, we can get out here and really help. So, you know, I just wanted to throw that out because you mentioned there was other avenues. We need to get involved in some of these organizations that are out here helping a lot.
I couldn't agree more. And Charlie's a good man and is doing yeoman's work, you know, in that area. And so, you know, I'm reminded of what Dr. King said about this topic. He said that anybody can be great because anybody can serve, right? And it doesn't, what did he, I'm going to probably butcher the quote, but he said something that the equivalency of saying, you know, your subject verb agreement doesn't have to match. You know, all you really need to do is serve, right? And in that's one way you can instill greatness in all of us. So
you know, let me jump just to give our listeners just a couple reasons why we think. I'll give a couple. Why don't you give a couple? Why they should listen to our podcast and follow us with this journey that we're on as far as service over self. You know, I'm going to begin with an awareness. Just because of the experience that we have, I think we want to be able to offer an understanding of, some experiences, some different perspectives, that we have had over the years that may encourage or inspire them. Empathy and understanding. I think, we all have our own passions. We all have our own skill levels. But I think we need to make sure that we keep empathy for others, in being able to serve and being able to, because as we open and let everyone know that we're giving the glory to God, I think that's where we have to have our foundation. And in showing empathy and understanding is giving us direction, and knowing that it's not that we got to put what we want on you, but we are going to understand where you're coming from and how we can help you get into the service. So those just a couple things that I just wanted to throw out, and why I think we should have those of you wanting to follow us or be a part of our podcast. What are some things you think you would encourage them to listen for?
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is the first thing is purpose, right? After COVID, a lot of people, including myself, we're always in search of our purpose in life, right? And I think one of the things that always comes to the top of mind is that we understand that there are folks out there that are less fortunate than ourselves, through no fault of their own in many cases, right? So finding your purpose, and part of that purpose is service for most of us. So activating what that purpose is for you could lend itself to you going down this path of wanting to serve others. The other thing is gratitude. There's a lot of people who would trade places with us, man.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? All of us, not just you and
Zach.
I, but
that's a good point.
A lot of people would trade places with us. So I just think, being mindful of that and doing what we can do to help fill the gaps, whatever that might look like for you, I think is the way to go. So I agree with you on empathy, but also gratitude is an area I think that could help spark the flame.
I think with this being the beginning, I think we want to try to create a ripple effect of being able to get others encouraged and excited about service in their community. Again, we have a different perspective over in this last month we're being faced with in our lives, and so we have to join together. We always talk about how someone helped us back in the day, and we didn't get here by ourselves. We didn't, land where we're at on this journey by ourselves. There was always somebody either beside us, in front of us, or behind us, pushing. And so, we need to show others how we benefited from that as well through our podcast.
No question about it, and I think, for me, it's just, and I believe most people listening, it's just about being a better person. Just being a better person, just being mindful of how I can live a more enriching life and do more and build legacy and all of the things that just coming with it, And, we can get off the couch.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
We consume a lot of television. We definitely consume a lot of social media. Think about it. If we could allocate 3 to 5 hours a month to doing something and contributing to something that is greater than ourselves, who wouldn't want to be a part of that?
Right.
You and I are sports guys, and is it Harbaugh? The former Michigan coach.
Yeah.
And I think he coaches for who now? The Chargers? Yeah.
My rival. I'm a Broncos fan. So.
Right. Well, after every win, I think, what does he say? Who's got it better than us?
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I think about when you got people actively serving their community, and you get done with a volunteer assignment, and you walk away just feeling grateful and accomplished, and the spirit of who's got it better than us. You know what I mean?
I have to agree with that. Who's got it better than us? But I also want to give a shout out to some of our teachers, because of course, the teaching profession, you don't get paid as much in social services as well, counseling, so on and so forth. So I want to give a shout out to a lot of our teachers who may not be getting paid for what they're worth. So some of that I'm gonna attribute to volunteering.
Yeah.
But I specifically want to say education, just because over the last 3 years prior to me moving to Atlanta, I was at East High School in Waterloo, Iowa, and some of the kids there, they I would say they made me feel like nobody had it better than me, because of the fact that I built some good relationships with a lot of those young people that are there, and I stay in touch with some, and so that's why I kind of got my focus on wanting to recognize young people for their service and getting them more excited about putting themselves second in some situations and going out and service. So down the road we want to do a thing where we want to recognize some of our young people for what they've done. So those of you that are listening, if you want to throw some young people that are at schools, regardless of what school they're at, where they're at, let me know where they're at, what they're doing, and I'll give them a shout out through our podcast, because I think recognition is a good thing for our young people. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, I think that recognition, especially young people who don't get the kind of promotion that we're talking about. We seem to talk about the negative stuff all the time, right?
Yes.
What young people aren't doing, and to the extent that we can lift them up through recognizing positive actions and positive accomplishments and achievements, I think that's the way to go. You mentioned earlier, I think is a point to amplify here. At the top of the podcast, you were talking about coaches and other volunteers in your life, that have made a difference with who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think let that resonate with everybody that's listening, because the people you help don't remember necessarily the programs. They don't remember even the experiences, but they do remember the people.
Mm-hmm.
They do remember the people that take the time to connect with them, to invest in them, to listen to them. That's the big takeaway, that you have taken the time out of your day to lift up others, and people remember that.
Yes.
And so, I look back on the kids, that I worked with, and the team that I had with the Boys and Girls Clubs. They always remember the people, and most of those folks were volunteers. They always remember the people. They don't really remember as I said, the programs or the experiences, but they do remember the people that were involved.
Yes, sir. Quick question. Let me see. What do I want to ask? There's a couple questions that I got here. How does serving others benefit not only those that help, but also yourself?
Well, it fills a need.
Mm-hmm.
You could point to a lot of different things. It could be, like I mentioned earlier, gratitude. To know that you have made a difference in somebody's lives. Gratitude from the standpoint, as I shared, that you are a part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
you could learn from being involved with areas that you may not have a lot of exposure to. And you can even build your own skill sets, whether it's social development, cultural development, and understanding of a certain sector of life that you may not have had some exposure to, whether it's the veterans or the homeless or young people or whatever, So there's a lot of benefit, I believe.
For me, I've said this to several people over the last probably 10, 12 years. I feel rich. Not in my pocket, not in my bank account, but in the people that I've been around, that I've either helped or have helped me. So it's made me rich, in a sense that I'm very confident, very aware, very understanding, constantly building relationships, because what I try to do is take a little bit of things from everybody and put it into me to make me a better self. And so that's why I say that it's helped me, because I feel like I've become a well-rounded person by serving others.
Yeah.
And it might just be something as simple as holding the door for somebody, or having a conversation with somebody that you absolutely don't know, but they're having a bad day, and you've done something to encourage that day. Those are things to me that are rich, that make us become better as individuals. So I just wanted to throw that out and say that I feel very rich when I talk about service over self.
Yeah, well said. Let's talk a little bit about how people can get involved.
Yes, sir.
Some of the pathways toward, if you're sitting out there, some of the pathways toward how do I get involved? I have no idea how to start some level of service. Where do I go? What should I think about? All of those kinds of things. Any thoughts from you on that?
I think, again, you had kind of jumped on it a little bit. I think is finding those organizations that need help, that need volunteers.
Yeah.
Of course, we're going to talk about churches, and we'll get into that point, as we move forward in this journey. But I think that's a good place. That's has been the foundation of our communities for many, many, many years, and we're actually losing some of that foundation.
Yeah.
And I think people need to get back into that. But there's a lot of community organizations that are grassroots organizations that need volunteers. I think we need to kind of encourage people to change our mentality of having to have a dollar amount put on our time or our efforts. And so getting involved in some of those community grassroots community programs, I think is to me the best way in doing it. But I think going to community centers or going to rec centers, boys and girls clubs, just saying, hey, I want to volunteer, if it's 2 hours a week, at least allowing people to see your face and get some of that wisdom that you have. I think our kids especially, but even our, Gen X and, and millennials still need some of that.
Yeah.
And so I think, just getting out and having conversations. Don't be afraid to say hello to someone. I think we use fear as a reason that we don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
I do have another story that I'd like to tell about how I changed my view on things years ago, back when I was working for Project Head Start. And it was during the Rodney King incident. And I actually, of course, that bothered a lot of us with all of that. And then they had the riots going on in L.A. And everything like that. And so I was in San Diego at convention. And I was watching TV all night about the riots, and of course it was bothering me. So I got up the next morning and went to walk down the street to go get something to eat. And I seen a brother with, a hoodie on, and, his pants was sagging a little bit. Well, he wasn't sagging. They were just big pants because they wore big stuff back then. And, he had some Timbs or some boots on, and, had some glasses on. And, my first thought was, man, I don't, really want to walk that way. And my own vision was that, and here I am working with kids, and so I walked up to this young man and asked him, did he know where Denny's or IHOP or whatever the restaurant was? And he was a very proper speaking young man. And I said, well, are you from here? He said, no, I'm from the Boston area. I go to a private school, and I never had the opportunity to wear this kind of clothing. But what was my first thought was negative.
You prejudged.
And so I had to change my whole thought process on how I approach just myself in being able to speak to individuals that I didn't know that I seen on the street. Because we judge just based on what our young people or what people look like. And so I had to change my view, and here I was working with people. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak. If they speak, they speak. If they don't, they don't. But just a simple hello may change someone's direction and for that day.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brent. We make judgments about things far too prematurely without taking the time to, really looking into the matter or having the conversations or doing whatever due diligence that might be needed. I want to kind of share with our listeners, if you do want to start and activate your volunteer work, there are some things you need to think about, and I'll share with you a few of them that will kind of help you with your readiness to get started. There are generally three categories for volunteer service. The first category are for people who don't have command of their free time, right? You don't know what your availability is going to be from one week to the next, but you still want to volunteer, right? So you want to get with an agency, an organization where you can learn the general work of the organization and the understanding, and most organizations can train or orientate you to that. And you just stop by when you have time, and then the team will plug you in where things are needed. So those are for folks who don't have command of your free time. So don't let that be a barrier. Do not let that be a barrier. The second assignment that you can get are for those folks who do have command of their free time. For example, if you could say, hey, I can be available for 2 hours a week for 10 weeks. Well, then you are ripe for a more specific volunteer assignment, whether it's coaching or teaching a class or mentoring or, something like that. And then the third one is, more of a project-based volunteer assignment. It could either be you as an individual or a group, and you go to an agency or an institution, and you just volunteer to whether it could be a cleanup, could be some kind of facility restoration, but more project-based. So the point here is that there's really no barriers if this is something you want to do. Mm-hmm. So, but just evaluate your own availability, and in most cases, you can get plugged in.
Yes. As we wind down, I'm gonna just kind of throw out some things that we're kind of may look at to some of our future podcasts and how we may be able to cultivate the future in service, and how we can empower others through service, and breaking those barriers and debunking some of the myths that we may have about getting engaged in service over self. So, we just ask that you, get ready, to get inspired and be entertained and educated. We're going to have some fun too, to help, get more of us in the mindset of service over self. So, that's kind of my closing thoughts. I don't know, Sax, if you got anything you want to close with.
Yeah, I think the big idea here is that, if you see something that's going on in the community and you take issue with, you can be a part of the solution. Just don't sit on your couch and throw rocks at the problems or be judgmental or critical of the situation. There are pathways into your involvement. And that's just the way change really happens in our lives. So hopefully this podcast will help shed some light around that and maybe demystify some of the concerns or barriers, as Brent mentioned, for you doing it. But it's just a part of successful living at the end of the day. And we can all come together and mobilize around this. And everyone that checks into this podcast hopefully will make a commitment to activate and get others to activate as well. So,
and helping put the pieces together, is what we want to do. So, I know I want to thank you for listening. And until we meet again and the next time, we definitely want you to be safe out there and stay prayed up.
Appreciate it, brother.
Yes. Until we meet again, bro.
Take care, everybody. Stay safe.